Today's webinar will be led by Dan Dubay, Director of Managed Teams Programs at Thirdera, and Jason Whitesides, VP Account Strategy. With that, I'll turn this over to Jason. Please take it from here.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you for joining us. We're excited that you could come as we share with you what we've learned about the ServiceNow platform and what our clients are doing to make sure that they've got a center of excellence inside of their organization to get the most out of ServiceNow. This is our agenda today. We have a lot on the topic, and I'm going to start out by just introducing, for people who are not familiar with Thirdera, to Thirdera. So Thirdera is a company that has the name, while being relatively new to the ServiceNow ecosystem, is actually a combination of several partners inside of ServiceNow that have joined together and formed to create Thirdera. Our name, Thirdera, is aspirational. We are looking to create the third era of ServiceNow partner and to help our customers attain the most value with the ServiceNow platform. As we've brought all of these organizations together, ServiceNow accreditations and certifications is really the focus of our organization. So this center of excellence idea is a topic that we are laser focused on, making sure that we are leading by example of how we get our customers the most value on the platform. We have now over 1,800 certifications and accreditations in ServiceNow. We are a combined organization of over 400 employees. We have apps in the ServiceNow App Store, totaling 5 of those. We have these workflow badges, which are a higher level than really even the accreditations and certifications. The workflow badges in IT workflow, employee experience, customer experience, signify that we have the minimum certification requirements. But in addition to that, we have customers that have given us customer satisfaction scores, and we have project deployment records that tie back into showing that we've done this in the field. So we've got those lessons learned in working across the ServiceNow platform in these workflow areas to make sure that our customers are getting the most value out of that. We're an authorized training partner. We are a beta release partner, and our CEO is part of the advisory council. And we work with ServiceNow in the Now Value program, which is essentially a good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, to make sure that our services are lined up to following best practices that ServiceNow has provided for the ecosystem. So that's a little bit about Thirdera, and where we are approaching this from is what we have learned in the years of experience that we've had in the platform and working with our customers. So I'm joined now by Dan Dubay. And Dan, we're going to talk a little bit as we follow this agenda of some different topics, and then we're going to end with some best practices that hopefully everybody can take and adopt into their organizations. But let's start with what does it take to build a proper ServiceNow team, Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and thanks, Anna. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Yeah, so let's start with, before we dive into the guts of building a team, let's talk about the challenge of building a team, right? We see a lot of challenges, and those of you that are ServiceNow customers, you're probably living it every single day. And first and foremost, right, are you getting the most out of ServiceNow? Does this slide look overwhelming? It's kind of meant to be, right? It's a lot, right? If this is ServiceNow out of box, right? These are all the things that are at your fingertips, are modules that you potentially own that you're not taking advantage of, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's, ServiceNow customers are first to admit, like, we're not the experts in this type of stuff, right? In terms of what we should do, in what order should we do it? Should we do it at all? And all that kind of stuff, right? So it's a very kind of overwhelming look and feel of all the things that, ServiceNow has, right? So if you're really trying to drive towards a certain outcome and digital transformation and have ServiceNow be the platform for all your business and customer workflows, right? There's a lot to take into account in order to get there.
And I would just say from here as well, Dan, right? You can see this is organized into the different workflow areas.
It is.
And what what I think everybody can take away from this is ServiceNow has invested to add capabilities into areas you might not even be thinking about right now. And so as you think about where you are in your current ServiceNow journey and what areas you're focused in, recognize that those higher workflows where there's use cases to tie all of these things together to solve a problem. And there's a need to have that expertise across all of these areas that we'll explore.
Very true. So when it comes to building upon that, right? The key challenges of owning the ServiceNow platform, right? You built ServiceNow, you've implemented ServiceNow, great. Now what, right? So, we have, hundreds of customers that we work with, day in and day out. And, we get to know them about what are the challenges around supporting the ServiceNow from an ongoing perspective, from owning ServiceNow, from implementing ServiceNow. And they kind of land into three main buckets. And you can kind of see here, first being, your users and stakeholders, right? That ever-growing backlog of stuff, right? Could be big strategic roadmap initiatives. It could be, onesie twosie enhancements, ongoing innovation, et cetera, right? We see that, right? Where customers just have so much coming into their team that they can barely keep their head above water, right? It doesn't have to be big strategic things. A lot of times it's the ongoing enhancements, right? And that parlays into, in the upper left there on user adoption, right? If you're not getting things done in the right order and in listening to your business and process owners, right? That oftentimes has downstream impacts to user adoption. So that's one area, right, where, customers are, trying to keep their head above water, and get to all the things they want, all the strategic and cool things they want to get to from the previous slide, but they're just bogged down in a lot of the day-to-day activities. Next being ServiceNow, your internal team, right? And that's, really the meat of what we're talking about today, right? Is building that team that's going to set you up for long-term ServiceNow success along your journey, right? But finding and retaining talent is super hard, right? It's been like that. I've been in the ecosystem for 11, almost 12 years, and it's hard to find talent. It's hard to retain talent, right? And the talent is expensive, right? Especially when you're building out teams to be in-house, right? So if you feel that, you're not alone, right? Very common in the ecosystem. And actually you should plan for it too, right? If you haven't lost a resource yet, you probably should plan for it, because that's very common in the ecosystem. Not meant to scare you, just, being transparent. Skills gaps, right? As the previous slide showed you, right? As you grow the platform out into the right, beyond ITSM and all the cool features and functionality that ServiceNow has out of box, right? You need to have the right skills in-house to be able to properly architect, implement, and support those other features, those other modules in ServiceNow, right? Traditionally, a lot of the talent that's out there has been trained in ITSM. Okay, but what about when you're wanting to expand the platform into CSM or HR case management, et cetera, right? Are you sure the talent that you have in-house is going to get you there and be able to scale the platform correctly, keep the out-of-box principles, et cetera? And then ServiceNow themselves, right? They're pushing out 2 new releases per year, a lot of great new features and functionality and innovation on the platform. They're wanting their customers to continue to push on the platform and expand beyond ITSM, et cetera, right? And so when you put all 3 of these buckets together, right, a lot of customers have experienced all of these, some experience 1 or 2, but the point being is you're not alone, right? Very common challenges that are in the ecosystem and have been in the ecosystem and typically and honestly, aren't going away anytime soon.
So Dan, I was gonna comment. One of the things that we see both, from the input from users and stakeholders, and the skills from the internal team and the growth of the Now platform, one of the things that we see where we have misses is when our clients, they don't understand that the ServiceNow platform could potentially solve a problem because they weren't aware that was in the latest release. They weren't aware of something. And then the folks that are on the team, they're able, or they're really good at, a certain area, but they don't necessarily understand the business case or when somebody raises their hand and says, gosh, it'd be great if ServiceNow does this. And so that leads to potentially solving the problem with a different technology when you've already made an investment with ServiceNow and it makes sense to grow those together. Or it could be a situation where we try to code something or build something not out of the box when the platform really has some of this capability out of the box. So there's a real challenge in making sure we leverage that and address those from that perspective. Is that fair?
100% agree. Yep. So when you take into account, like, well, how can I build the right team to make me successful, and that sort of thing. There's 3 different traditional service models, right? But they can all be limiting in terms of what they can do and how they can do it and the expense of it and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you talk about like 100%, we're going to build out our own internal team, right? We talked about this on the previous slide, so I'm not going to go through it all, but the amount of effort and time and expense and turnover around building out an internal team, right? It oftentimes isn't working, right? And we talked about that on the previous slide. Offshore providers, while providing a very economical price point, is not necessarily the best approach from a 100% offshore model to being successful on the platform, right? You're making a very large investment in ServiceNow initially and ongoing. It's important that you have the right team set up to get you there. And sometimes with offshore providers, they don't bring that consultative approach to things big and small, right? They're more of this kind of order taker, yes ma'am, yes sir approach, where they're going to go off and do whatever you tell them to do. And if there's one thing I've learned from being in the ServiceNow ecosystem for 12 years, is that doesn't work, right? It's you truly need to bring that consultative approach, and whether it's a large strategic initiative or a onesie twosie enhancement, right? It's having a conversation and solutioning out that idea, keeping the out-of-box principles as well. And then outside consultants, right? Typically when outside consultants come in, right, typically it's quite expensive. The contracts process can be a pain, and there's oftentimes inflexibility in how they deliver and in the teams and all that kind of stuff, right? So point being, not meant to scare you, but these are traditional models that when you're trying to go 100% into each one of these, it brings some challenges ongoing, initially and ongoing.
And I think one of the points you're making, Dan, is that sometimes contractually, everything except for the internal team is not very agile. You're not able to pivot and address a business need that comes up and arises. You're not able to, sometimes the outside consultant or the offshore providers, they're sort of tied to a specific direction. And in the agile world that we live in, and we all know things can come up and change our focus and change where we're going. So I think that's another key challenge to some of the traditional service models, or being tied 100% to them.
Yep, exactly. So building the right ServiceNow team for platform success, right? I know we only have so much time here, right? We're not here to solve the entire all these challenges in less than an hour, right? So we're going to keep this to high level, and most importantly, we're going to keep it to give you some good bits of information regardless of who you are, right? Whether you're a large strategic customer of ServiceNow or you're a smaller commercial customer, right? There should be good general tidbits of content and best practices in here that everybody can take away. So when you get to the basics, right, and you're talking about we need to build a team, right? If you look on the left-hand side, from a role perspective, typically you need to be prepared to have all these roles ready to go. And right, we don't necessarily mean you need to hire this many roles and multiple of each roles, right? Not meant to scare you, but more so you need to be have the activities that each one of these roles would do prepared for somebody to take on, right? And so every customer is different in terms of size and complexity and budget and all that kind of stuff, right? We know that smaller ServiceNow customers aren't going to have roles defined, FTEs for all these different roles, but you need to have the activity prepared to address the activities that each one of these roles would do. So it's quite common, right, for ServiceNow, in the ServiceNow world, for customers where team members on your team, whether you have one person or 10 people, right, on your team, that they're wearing multiple hats, right? You may have a platform owner that's also the BA, and you may have developer doing system administration and development, some BA, right? Point being, that's good and that's okay. You need to be prepared for the activities that each one of these roles do. You need to have somebody defined that's going to take them on, whether it's a 1-to-1 ratio or you're going to have somebody resources wearing multiple hats. There. So when you talk about those roles and how they roll up to a team, right? When we, like I said, we have hundreds of customers that we work with day in and day out, and they all kind of fit into one of these three areas in terms of the type of team that they are internally and how a company like Thirdera, supports them, right? First and foremost, not foremost, but firstly, keep the lights on type model, right? Very much just production support, resolving any issues that come in, system administration, doing upgrades, maybe one upgrade per year, to try and stay as current as possible, and to just general light configuration and enhancements on the platform. So, not necessarily innovating and getting a lot done. They may do some levels of the next steps below, indirectly, but not necessarily defined processes and governance and all that kind of stuff. Platform teams, you can see here, this is probably the most common we see, right? Where they keep the lights on activities covered, but then they also are doing ongoing innovation, right? Whether that be some implementation type activities, but more so the ongoing enhancements to what they're live with, right? They're continuing to turn the screws and innovate and automate workflows as much as possible, as well as operational oversight in how they're doing releases and sprints and upgrades, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, right, the center of excellence and innovation, right? Sometimes the center of excellence, COE, when you hear that term, right, sometimes has a negative connotation where it's more just we're not going to continually innovate on the platform. And so ServiceNow really does a good job of talking about center of excellence and innovation, right? Where that's really the key, right? Is we're going to continually drive towards, innovation, right? We're not just going to go live on ServiceNow and that's it, right? We're going to have a program set up to really achieve the outcomes that we want to get on ServiceNow. So regardless of where you sit, right, each model should have a defined vision to reach ServiceNow return on investment as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that vision and that ROI is maybe different for who you are, right? As an organization, your size, what you're live with, what you're wanting to get out of ServiceNow, et cetera. As well as, you need to establish ServiceNow's role within the organization as the platform for digitizing workflows, right? And that, that's some of the stuff we'll talk about here is how to get there. So we have kind of 4 best practices that we're going to talk about here next that really drive, getting the right team set up for success. And like I said, these are good, solid best practices to kind of get you going, no matter what size and complexity of customer you are. So if we start with number 1, right, setting the foundations for your team, right? And that really centers around setting the vision to build your case for the immediate and long-term ServiceNow team, right? So when we say we're going to define the vision, right, it should be centered around innovation, right? An example vision may be, we are going to build and deliver world-class digital service experiences for our employees, not just our employees, but our customers as well, right? So setting the vision is really what drives all the kind of downstream areas next around strategic drivers, right? Strategic drivers are how we're going to, we need to improve our customers and our employees' experiences. We need to reduce the time employees spend on low value administrative work, right? What does that mean? Things that we can automate within ServiceNow. Desired business outcomes, right? So we're going to improve our customer retention and loyalty by giving them that better experience through the Now platform. We're going to speed up and improve customer case resolution. We're going to improve employee productivity, and we're going to improve employee satisfaction, right? So those are typical or example business outcomes of why you need to build a team and getting the buy-in around the type of team you need to be successful. And then the key measures of success, right? We're not going to define that for you, but examples of how we're going to measure our success, right, is maybe we're going to improve our mean time to resolution by a certain %, right? We're going to drive more usage to self-service by X%, right, versus picking up the phone or sending an email, right? We're going to drive self-service usage because we all know when things start coming in more and more via self-service, what the downstream impacts to that, right? We can make incremental improvements to that through automation, through virtual agent, through orchestration, et cetera. And then also improve employee satisfaction, right? We want to improve our employee satisfaction from a 3.5 to a 4.5, right? So those are things that you would need to measure to set up and define as an organization that kind of coincide with starting out with, building that, whatever that overall vision is for your ServiceNow platform. Secondly, right, we want to make sure you have a clearly defined strategic roadmap in place, right? Sure, when you're buying ServiceNow, right, and you're implementing it, right, you're focused on, the things that for your initial go live. But what about the next 12 to 36 months on the platform, right? Knowing that we have a defined strategic roadmap of our strategic initiatives that we know how much from a rough order of magnitude, from a licensing perspective, from a cost for implementing and team size perspective to implement and support after go live, right, needs to be defined as well. Sorry, Jason, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that I think the interesting thing about this ties back even to the type of ServiceNow team and where your direction is. By having that vision and setting the foundations here, you can really define what's most important for you, and then you put those key measurements in place. And this year the goal might be to get the self-service up to 50%, and then you can take that and realign and do a different measurement or different improvement to align to the business, right? So I think it's really important to have that foundational vision and document that you're saying, this is what we're going to accomplish with ServiceNow this year.
Yeah. And this really drives, the type of team that you're going to need. And we'll talk about that here, shortly. So building a ServiceNow team, right? Defining a charter and structure for your team, right? This charter you establish needs to focus the team on transforming business demands into business outcomes. platforms, right? So defining what the charter is that rolls up to that vision from the last slide, right? So an example charter may be, best practice standards for digital workflow design. We're going to make simple, repeatable, reusable, get to ROI quicker, and improve our user experiences that are uniform and consistent, right? Or also, we're going to innovation prototyping for digital workflows, right? We're going to find new opportunities for automating ServiceNow. Having governance and resource management, right? We're going to have innovation centers around the highest priorities of the business and our customers, right? So we're going to, focus on what our business is needing in order to be successful on ServiceNow, but also we're going to be proactive around it too, right? So we're going to help drive what we feel like the business needs and the process owners need in order for them to be successful. And then value management, right? So clear financial return on the platform, right? And that comes down to employee productivity and improving and being able to measure and improve our customer satisfaction scores.
So Dan,
yep.
What, as you're building this out, like let's say during your initial implementation phases, what do you think the focus for your center of excellence should be?
Yeah, I mean the focus should be around getting the right team in place to be able to take on not only the initial implementation and ongoing support, but also the ongoing innovation, right? So making sure you have the right team in place in order to get to those to achieve those the goals that are defined in your vision and charter.
Awesome.
So defining your engagement and delivery model, right? So who defines and approves the ServiceNow roadmap, right? Who prioritizes the demand backlog? Who defines architectural and technical standards? For each application you're live with, having defined process owners and who are accountable for their application and the corresponding workflows and delivering value within each one of those, right? And typically those are captured via a series of RACI charts, right? And then from a demand management perspective, like how the team interacts with stakeholders and process owners to deliver on all the demands that are coming in, right? So, and that's like I was saying earlier, not just for inbound demands coming from the business, but also taking a proactive approach to taking our findings that we're seeing on the platform and our metrics back to them and talking to them about how they should be thinking about success on the platform. And then lastly, this is best practice 3 again, but this is best practice 4, right? Defining the right resourcing model, right? So once you have all the above defined, right, then you can start building out that budget for your team based on, a couple of different factors, right? What you're live with, what you're about to go live with, the complexities of your environment and the complexities of your company and your organization, and also the maturity of your processes, right? And actually, it's worth noting that Thirdera has some really good calculators that can help you define team sizes, where you need to be, all that kind of stuff. So that are free to use, and we'd love to kind of work with you on. Building that, having that roadmap in place as well, right? That strategic roadmap that we talked about earlier, right? Knowing the next 12 to 36 months what your budget is for implementation, right, is key, right? Because that helps drive, the type of team you're going to need to be able to, whether that be part of the implementation or you're going to utilize a partner for implementation or some blend of all the above, right? Having that multi-year roadmap with corresponding rough order of magnitudes, right? Hey, we want to implement CSM, HR, and IRM in the next running 12 months, right? each one of these is going to cost a certain amount from a license perspective and from an implementation perspective, right? Having that level, getting down to that level of detail is going to help you from a budget perspective, from an approval perspective, from getting buy-in from your executive stakeholders, right? And then just lastly, just decipher how your team is going to be set up, right? Are we going to build this completely in-house? Are we going to outsource this to a partner like Thirdera, or some combination of the above, right? And typically we see, some combination of the above, right, is what we see working day in and day out with our customers.
So Dan, I heard you share that we've got the ability to help with the calculators piece, help to define the right resource model.
Yeah.
Do we also have things in place where we could help with either the vision setting the foundation or helping with charters for people going back to the first two best practices?
We do. Yeah. Yep. Of course. Yep. And a lot of that comes from when we do the strategic roadmap initiative, right? That's typically one of the first steps of when we come in and talk to you about what is success on ServiceNow with you, right? We help define that vision for you, with you, should you need help with it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So Thirdera managed teams, right? So we have a program here called Managed Teams, right? And it's centered around helping ServiceNow customers deliver on all their strategic and run state initiatives, right? And so inside of Managed Teams, we have two models, right? We have an evolve model and we have a run model, right? And both of these do nothing but help ServiceNow customers get stuff done, right? Whether it's a fully dedicated team that's going to help drive and implement your strategic roadmap, as well as architecture and process guidance and governance and ongoing kind of run state support, down to we got this part covered, but we need help with our run state, right? We need help with how we're going to properly support the platform after we're up and running, or as we continually to add new features and functionality, how we're going to properly support it. And support doesn't necessarily mean keep the lights on, right? When we say support and run, it's just as important as the support pieces is the ongoing innovation pieces, right? The ongoing enhancements that'll continue to come into your backlog as part of going live with something, right? So we have these two services. They're super flexible. They're easy to get into. They're easy to get out of, right? Should you need to, right? Maybe it's something just a short-term thing until you find the right internal team members, or you have junior level resources and you want to get them matured up over time, right? The point is these are easy to entry, easy to exit, flexible, attractive from a rate perspective, and most importantly, what I was saying earlier, right? They truly bring the consultative guns to everything we do, right? Things big and small, right? And that's really how to be successful in delivering and supporting ServiceNow and providing good services to your business.
So Dan, I think that as we talked about this, right, you have the ability with internal resources, you have some blend of consultants to help you. And we've talked about implementation work. So obviously we've got projects that we do, and that's how many people are used to leveraging partners in the ServiceNow ecosystem. But both of these programs were really created to try and address the need that we were seeing with demand placed on these internal teams and placed on
Right.
platform owners, trying to solve for that third part of the equation, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's all those challenges we talked about at the beginning from a people and talent perspective, is having the right level of talent in-house to be able to get all the things done I want to get done. Right. I know I need this type of resource and this type of resource. I need architecture, I need development, I need BAs, but maybe I don't need a full-time architect. Maybe I'll need a part of an architect, or I need an architect on demand, or, right. So these services help customers and the flexibility around them, where they can kind of ramp up or ramp down different types of resources and skill sets based on what the immediate needs and prior demands are, and also around the flexibility of it, right? ServiceNow in this kind of digital transformation world and COVID climate and all that stuff, right? Priorities are shifting, monthly at customers, right? So having services like these in place that allow customers to shift on a dime and flex on based on where priorities are heading and shifting and that sort of thing is awesome, because like I was saying earlier, sometimes when you use outside consultants, right, you're in these very hard-coded contracts that say you get this amount of this resource and this meant this much capacity of development, this much of, like, well, what if I need to flip that over on its head and use more of architecture and less development, right? Those contracts are not flexible.
Right.
All right, so enough about us, so let's talk about our client successes, right? So, we're proud of, how our managed teams help customers be successful on the platform, right? I'm not going to read this, right? I know it's a little wordy, and this stuff will be posted out online afterwards, so you can grab it. All right, but here's a customer, right, that had been on ServiceNow for 8+ years. They were using a large global system integrator to implement and support the platform, and after multiple years on the platform, right, found themselves with huge technical debt, had to re-implement, right, because they kind of developed themselves into a corner, right? So, Thirdera was brought on to help with that re-implementation, to get them back to square, but also set up for success after go live, right? Just as important as re-implementing, probably even more important, was how we're gonna be set up after go live for success from a governance perspective, architecture, ongoing innovation, et cetera, to make sure that we don't get into the situation that we got ourselves into previously.
Yeah, I think that's where it really speaks to working with somebody who's plugged into the ServiceNow ecosystem as a partner, working with somebody who's able to, as you implement new releases of ServiceNow, that you are retiring customizations that no longer make sense, reducing technical debt along the way. It's important to have that visibility. That's why it's important to have that roadmap that Dan's talked about. There's a lot of different things here that are really good lessons learned to making sure that your investment into ServiceNow as a continually improving platform, that you're moving as fast as that and staying up with it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last one, right? So how a customer from a run state perspective, right, just got buried, right? They have very little or zero in-house talent, right? They've had turnover resources over time and just continue to build up a ever-growing backlog of stuff that needed to get done, right? From an ongoing innovation, ongoing enhancement perspective. And so you can imagine user adoption suffered because of that, right? They weren't getting done. They were kind of just shifted into this, keep the lights on, do the basics to kind of keep things going perspective. And so through Thirdera's run services, right, we came in and plowed through that backlog, right, help them prioritize the things that they should get done, quick win type initiatives, and drive down that backlog, right? And you can see the success around that backlog, right? How that backlog got into a better spot. We put demand management process in place around that backlog to decipher what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, if we're going to do it at all, et cetera.
And I think one of the key takeaways from a customer story like this is if you let the backlog build up to the point where your customer doesn't feel like there's any feedback loop, that they don't feel like there's if they ask for an enhancement, if they ask for things, there's no feedback loop, there's no clear way that anybody knows that somebody's listening to their request. It just leads with an ever increasing amount of frustration with the solution. So by staying on top of the backlog and then by building a feedback loop so that your customers, the people that we're doing and creating these services for, are able to come back and say, okay, that maybe that idea is not something that's going to get done or put into the next release, but at least somebody gave me feedback. At least I know what it's happening. It does naturally lead to some of the success that we saw here, which is the increase in user adoption and increase in self-service and just a higher satisfaction rating of what services are being provided.
Yeah, and the downstream impact of all this, right? It's not listed here, but this customer kind of sat stagnant with what they were live with for multiple years, right? And they could never get approval for, taking advantage of all the new things in ServiceNow that were coming out in latest releases. And doing this stuff right here, listed here, allowed them, from an executive perspective to see the value that ServiceNow is bringing, to bring it more into the forefront, into the C-suite and per se, and allow them to start innovating more, start implementing more, I should say.
Yeah, so you turn like a negative feedback loop into a really positive one.
Exactly. All right, so that is where we'll stop. I think we already have a few questions coming in. Jason or Anna, do you want to grab those?
I'll start reading. The first one I see is, do you see any downside of my organization finding talent in-house and investing in training them up on ServiceNow? Yeah, so a couple of things around that, right? So oftentimes, if you're building up resources, especially from a technical perspective, like, hey, we're going to grab this guy or this gal out of the service desk and get them trained up to be a system administrator, or train up this developer on ServiceNow, right? That's great. But oftentimes, once you do that, 6 months, you spend all this time and effort getting them up and running on ServiceNow. They put it on their LinkedIn profile, and next thing you know, they're getting recruited heavily right after that, right? And lots of money being thrown around that as well, right? So it's sticker shock type stuff, right? Wow. So we see a lot of that as far as training technical resources up internally. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but just from a transparency perspective, we see a lot of that. But also around just building out in-house talent as well. I think there's something to say about bringing in talent and capabilities that have an outsider's perspective, right? That aren't necessarily have been just walking the halls of your organization for last X number of years, right? We've been in other companies. These resources have experienced similar situations that you may be experiencing, and this is how we solved it. Keeping the out-of-box principles, all that kind of stuff, right? So I think there's something to say about bringing in fresh perspective, new perspectives, and that sort of thing for certain roles on your team. I'll just chime in here. I think one of the key pieces is as you go back to that vision, making a charter statement, identifying what type of team you're building for your center of excellence, it's important that you, with those guide rails, identify where you need in-house talent, skills, and capabilities, and make that your focus. Don't make it your focus to have everything. So figure out where you want to leverage. And then I would say the other thing that sometimes customers may not think about is just the speed to execution, because there is a gap from as you start training someone. When you start at the beginning, there's a gap of getting from where they are to having that expert level. And that takes time that if you're dependent upon that for hitting your goals, getting to where you want to be for, let's say we've identified a vision or we have a big rallying cry that we're trying to make sure everybody gets to. If that's dependent on getting somebody through training and getting somebody to a certain level of expertise on ServiceNow, you just have to factor that in and make sure you understand that, rather than tapping somebody who's already got that expertise and pulling them in to help you.
Yeah, excellent point.
All right, next question. What would you say is the key trait of a productive team member? Well, this is, Dan, you'll probably say not having Jason be on the webinar with me is more productive.
No comment, no. Yeah, no, I said it earlier, I may have said it a couple times, but bringing that consultative approach to everything, things big and small, right? To me, that's the biggest trait character of a successful resource, whether that be in-house or an outside consultant from a partner or contractor, et cetera, right? Give me, if I'm a ServiceNow, put my ServiceNow customer hat on, give me people that are just as strong consultatively in terms of solutioning out ideas and having a conversation and keeping the out-of-box principles and talking about what's worked at other customers. That kind of stuff is just as important as, oh, this guy's a really good developer or this guy's really strong technically, right? To me, that's the key to success in terms of finding good talent in ServiceNow.
Yeah, I think you're sort of hitting on, so, they're asking for the key trait, and I think it's hard to break that down into like one word. I agree with everything that you said, Dan. I think if you step back and find team members that are willing to align to that big vision that you're trying to accomplish, regardless of their role, those are the kind of people that we've seen, drive the value of ServiceNow to big heights. As people align across, some people do that in a very technical way. Some people do that in a very process oriented way, or aligning to solving a business problem. But the ability to align on those goals and sort of recognize where you have strengths and weaknesses, but pulling in people in the right places. I think that's what I've seen with the most successful clients out there.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
All right. We got a timely one. How has COVID impacted building teams?
Ooh, a COVID question. Yeah, I mean, a couple things around that, right? I think COVID kind of, obviously we saw how ServiceNow was, obviously ServiceNow has been exploding for years, but, even in the COVID climate, right? It really exposed, customers by companies having to go remote, as an example, right? It really exposed gaps in customers' processes, manual processes, as an example, right? By sending all of their employees home to work from, right? So it really fast-tracked, digital transformation and finding good talent, right? Because now talent was hard to find pre-COVID, and it's, even more competitive now. So that's point number one. And then two is from a positive perspective, I think, it kind of broadened the workforce to be more of a global workforce now, right? Where, you as a ServiceNow customer may have been looking for talent regionally or locally or in-house, or to hire, to come on site and work in an office. Whereas now maybe you don't care as much anymore, right? It can be somebody located in another part of the States or in Latin America, as an example, right?
Yeah, I like the positive side of that.
Yeah,
I think the biggest thing, like you shared when I first read the question, was just the difficulty in finding the right resources. But yeah, you're right. Having the ability to work remotely, having a renewed focus on making workflows go digital. There's some exciting things where you can reach in and tap, even maybe a global workforce where you weren't doing that before in some cases. So
yeah, and they all bring, I think that opens up, different perspectives on how to implement things and how to support ServiceNow and how to implement ServiceNow and how to enhance ServiceNow. Like, opening up that that channel, right, to broaden our scope and where we're going to hire from, I think brings a fresh perspective on into your team as well. So
Yeah. Nice. I like that with a positive spin.
yeah,
Dan.
that was a good question. Whoever came up with that.
I don't see any more questions in the Q&A panel.
Okay. So let me just go to the last slide here, right? So I know like I said earlier, we kept this, high level. We kept this in an area, in a sweet spot where we hope that it touched many different sizes and complexities and budgets of ServiceNow customers. But if you want to do a deeper dive, if you want to learn more about these managed teams offerings, we will walk you through. If you want to tap into our capabilities around some of these calculators we have, right? Send us an email at now@thirdera.com, and we can just have a simple conversation about this stuff, right? Also, I should say ServiceNow has some really good content around all this as well. So if you Google, ServiceNow COE or ServiceNow COEI or ServiceNow building a team, right? There's a lot of good content out there, right? Some of it we utilize as well, right? You may see some of this content ServiceNow talks through as well. So I encourage you to look at some of the content out there that ServiceNow has out there and continues to update and put out there as well. So thank you, I appreciate it. And we'll close this out now.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
Dan.
Dan, and thank you, Jason, for this insightful webinar. Really appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for joining, and we're looking forward to seeing you at our next webinars and virtual trainings. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.